this is not a reluctant partner we're dealing with here. Nature is not a reluctant partner that we have to put in a half Nelson and I'm gonna force you and make you. No, it's a benevolent lover that desires to be caressed into abundance. It's not a place of scarcity, it's a place of abundance. And to be able to have a part in that tactily and participatorily, viscerally, is just the greatest privilege in life. We believe nature is fundamentally well. And if it's not well, then we probably messed it up somewhere. You learn a lot more when you come from an assumption that nature is fundamentally well than you come from an assumption that nature is fundamentally mechanical, and if it's not working, well, I just didn't use the right concoction. Sometimes you don't know at the time, as a child, you don't know the impact that things are having on you, whatever, your mental state, your emotions, your trajectory. And so Dad's vision from a little child was to have a farm. Well, how does a poor Midwestern kid, get a farm? And so after World War II, he flew bombers in the Navy in World War II. After he went on the GI Bill then to Indiana University, majored in economics, and graduated. And then his dream, he saw this new frontier in Latin America. And so he went with Texas Oil Company as a bilingual accountant, and in Venezuela, South America, and in 7 years saved up enough to buy a 1,000-acre farm in Venezuela, and started. And so then, married Mom, and they were down there, and the dream was to have a dairy and broiler operation in Venezuela. Started raising chickens. Yes, it's cheap land and a fairly free market, but there's a lot of instability. We came back, we landed here in the US Easter Sunday of 1961, looked at farms in the Mid-Atlantic region here and settled on the cheapest, most worn out, gullied rock pile we could find. The contrast of our hardship, but the vision of that abundance, it was foundational in creating a desire in me that it doesn't have to just be hardship. It doesn't have to be hard scrabble rock gullies. You can touch this. You can touch this and build abundance and provision and succulence and sufficiency, right, into the landscape, into your life. A diversified species of symbiotic plants and animals. Most of food production right now, certainly in the Western world, is monocultures. I'm a corn farmer, I'm a soybean, I'm a dairy, I'm a cherry farm, whatever. And so a polyculture is where you combine different kinds of plants and animals. It's all about carbon. The soil runs on a carbon economy. Whether it's the root hairs that slough off after it is pruned, either mechanically or by grazing, or whether it's a tree that falls over in the woods and rots, or tall grass that falls over. We call that lodging, and then decomposes. But everything, the soil, the whole ecological system runs on a decomposition cycle. Today we're very familiar with compost piles. Nature doesn't make compost piles, but nature stimulates this carbonaceous decomposition. That's how soil is built. Where's our carbon sink? Well, our first carbon sink is in the grass, and grass grows in a sigmoid curve, an S curve. It starts slow and grows real fast and then slows down. To help us to appreciate the cycles, I like to call this first, slow part, I call it diaper grass, then teenage grass, and then nursing home grass, all right, to get the cycles of life. Well, if you want to stimulate biomass and carbon production, you want to keep that grass in the juvenile, the rapid growth stage, not diaper and not nursing home. Well, how does nature do that? Nature does that with the herbivore coming in at senescence, pruning it back to restart this accelerated growth cycle. It does it with animals moving, mowing, and mobbing, okay? Moving, mowing, mobbing. So we duplicate moving, mowing, mobbing with our electric fence so that we move the cows every single day. We give them one day's plate full. Tomorrow at 4 they move to this one, and tomorrow at 4 they move at this one. 1 acre will support 80 cows for 1 day a year, all right, 80 cow days per acre. Here, we're averaging more than 400 cow days per acre, and we've never planted a seed or bought a bag of chemical fertilizer in 60 years. For me, the bottom line is just to vision, to imagine if all the money currently spent on chemical fertilizer were instead pumped into a carbon economy. Not only would we have healthier, productive forest lands, but we would actually create a sacred, self-affirming economy for a lot of people who enjoy working outdoors with their hands. And a carbon economy creates noble, righteous, sacred, affirming work for people who want to massage our ecological umbilical with participatory touches. So the ancient diets revolved around either the sea or the grass because those did not require tillage. Well, why tillage? To grow grains. Grain was a luxurious item. Peasant food was milk and mutton and beef and goat. All these herbivores, because you didn't have to plow anything, you didn't have to grow grain, you didn't have to try to preserve feedstocks through the year. So the shepherding, the nomadic lifestyle was the basis of civilization, and people got very good at mimicking the kind of movement of herbivores that we see today, for example, on the Serengeti, or we saw on the American plains with the bison, those migratory choreographies with the herbivore to move the great grasslands of the world. And in fact, because grass does have a faster metabolism than trees and shrubs, the deepest soils on the planet all developed under herbivores and grasslands, not in forests and not in bushes. Perennials build soil because the energy flow is different. In a perennial, the plant takes in solar energy, puts it in biomass, and essentially the plant inhales carbon dioxide, it splits off the oxygen and exhales the oxygen so that animals can breathe, and it splits off the carbon and puts it in cellulose, in biomass structure. And in doing so, in this process of feeding, the plant makes sugars, the polysaccharides and all these sugars that it pumps down into the soil as energy, and actually creates a root mass bank account of energy, because the perennial has to survive flood, fire, grazing, all that stuff. So if the plant gets whacked off at the soil level, the bank account in the root reserves has to send forth a new shoot. An annual is opposite. it doesn't put energy in the roots. It puts energy in the seed up here, the grain, the barley, the wheat, the corn. It puts soybean, it puts it up here in the seed with a great big old fat plump seed, depending on that seed to carry its life forward if something annihilates the plant. So one takes the energy, pumps it into the ground. We call that the pulsing of the pasture. And the other is extractive and pulls energy from the soil and puts it up in these big plump seeds we call grains. Until the Industrial Revolution here, all the farm's power came from draft animals, horses, mules, oxen, okay? When we found petroleum and everything went away from draft power, you know, by the 1930s and 40s, we lost all that draft power, and now suddenly the brakes on the devastation that tillage could do to the land, those brakes now came off. And so our destructive capacity is huge. I mean, that's why we now have a dead zone the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico. That was not possible before. Now it's actually possible. The short answer to the grass question is that as a perennial, the grass enabled a nutrient-dense food to be grown without laborious tillage. And that underpinned all ancient civilizations. I can tell you that in the Orthodox farming community, the assumption is nature is fundamentally sick and we have to fix it. And if something on my farm isn't well, I just didn't use the right chemical, I didn't use the right vaccine, I didn't use the right drug. That's the mentality. Ours is, if I've got an animal sick, oh, what did I do to break down the immunological function that allowed this animal to get sick? You learn a lot more when you come from an assumption that nature's fundamentally well than you come from an assumption that nature's fundamentally mechanical, and if it's not working, you know, I just didn't use the right concoction. So here at Polyface, the first big kind of template that we realized is, well, animals move. We're supposed to lock them up in little tiny factories, little compartments, and the fact that they actually have feet and legs is ancillary to their existence. So rather than, you know, stationary structures, we have mobile. We have, you know, egg mobiles, shade mobiles, gobbledygos, duck mobiles. We have all sorts of mobile shade structure to provide mobile shade, like portable shade trees, as these animals move around. Innovations and infrastructure that we've designed simply to accommodate the simple phrase, animals move. There was an article in a farm magazine, and it got my attention. It said that 50%, the average farm, 50% of its expense is fuel. And so that really got my attention. I thought, man, ours can't be that much, even though we run, you know, two delivery trucks and stuff, and we're running to the city all the time delivering. And I thought, that can't be. So I did an audit. I looked and did an audit, and I found that ours was 5%. So I realized then, shoot, diesel could go to $12 a gallon and we'd still be, now we wouldn't like it, but we would still be okay. Whereas the average farm, if diesel went to $12 a gallon, we'd be in, you know, it'd be in big trouble. So, you know, there is a certain level of comfort in knowing at least we'd be the last guy standing. And you hope that by the time you're the last guy standing, some innovation has, you know, come along to kind of take the edge off of it. You know, what floats our boat more than anything is touching land. I mean, I think you could see that. And I mean, look, I love good food and I like serving people good food, but what really floats my boat is I know when we touch land the way we touch it, it just, the earthworms, I mean, it just comes alive. And that makes me and the whole family, we all agree with that. That's our, and I think the family has got it from me. My vision is just touching this land, and I drive down these rural roads and I see overgrazed fields, I see active gullies, I see dirt in the creek, and my heart breaks. My grandfather in Indiana was a tinkerer, master gardener. He was a charter subscriber to Rodale's Organic Gardening and Farming magazine. And we go up there at the end of the summer, and his place, I almost can't speak of this without breaking down, his place was just verdant. I mean, he had this huge garden. It's probably a quarter acre, which, you know, to a 7-year-old, a quarter acre is a big garden, right? And the whole garden was surrounded by a T-trellis grape arbor. And of course, we could only go up late in the summer after hay was done here, and the grapes were always ripe, and they were just juicy, and a little kid, you know, they were just high enough to reach. And I could just go out there, and he had strawberries and raspberries and these grapes, and to walk out into that abundance and provision was just unbelievable. Well, for me, one of probably the single biggest milestone in modern times goes back to 1837, when Justus von Liebig, with his vacuum tubes, told the world that all of life is simply a rearrangement of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, NPK. Now, bless his heart, he was trying to solve the fertility issue. I mean, so I don't question his sincerity, okay? And in fact, there's a lot of evidence that he actually retracted later in life, a little bit like Louis Pasteur. Justus von Liebig in 1837 moved us from this spirit mystery kind of view to a very mechanical view. And so where previously people, I would agree, had an inordinate fear of, I don't know about, I can't go there, that's got a hex sign over it or whatever, right? Now we just wade, it's just mechanical. Now we wade in with no thought whatsoever to externalized ramifications. It has taken off the constraints of discovery. My dad used to call it overrunning our headlights. We can go places faster than we can understand our responsibilities in having gotten there. You see, I'm a big believer that we're pretty clever as humans, and we can actually discover things or innovate things that are beyond our capacity to mentally, physically, or spiritually metabolize. Nature tends towards some sort of a homeostatic balance. We have artificially pushed biology beyond its functional homeostasis place. And when you do that on a grand scale, you know, we say you are what you eat. You know, when your body's fuel is all coming from a biological world that is artificially manipulated beyond its point of functionality, well, then we become dysfunctional. You know, Sir Albert Howard, when he was writing an agricultural testament and introducing the aerobic composting process to the world in 1943, he had a statement in there. One of his most famous ones is, when we use artificial fertilizers, that's what he called chemical fertilizers, to create artificial soil, it grows artificial plants, which produce artificial animals, which make artificial people who can only be kept alive with artificials. The U.S. now leads the world in the 5 non-infectious chronic causes of morbidity: cancer, diabetes, obesity. We're seeing increasing diseases on the farm, from animal diseases to plant diseases, just a steady erosion of immunological function. And I think there is more and more recognition now that if we lose our soil, We've lost, and no, you're not going to make it up with hydroponics. You're not going to make it up with other things. The soil food web is so intricate. I mean, we know how to land people on the moon. The relative amount that we know about the functionality in the soil is tiny. And so, you know, I'm a believer, we need to start looking at the obvious under our nose. You can document the, you know, the loss of nutrient. We participated in a Mother Earth News magazine survey where they sent eggs to a lab for nutrient analysis. And they compared pastured eggs to, you know, what was on the USDA nutritional on the carton. And ours, for example, folate, which is really important for pregnant women. The regular egg carton averaged, I think it was 48 micrograms per egg. Ours averaged 1,038 micrograms per egg. I mean, we're not talking about 10% deviations here. You know, grass-finished beef, 300% more riboflavin than grain-finished. Riboflavin is the calming vitamin. It's what keeps you from going nutso. And so we wonder why people are going nutso. Well, grain-finished beef doesn't have any riboflavin in it. And you can just look at this throughout, you know. So how bad does the soil, does the farming, does the food have to get before a tipping point is reached and we realized we can't remediate this with something out of a bottle? Let's caress our own garden for a change instead of just soiling it and expecting we can go find a nest somewhere else. Well, certainly the two most common questions I get asked are, one, this is all nice and pretty and warm and fuzzy, but can it feed the world? And the second one is, even if it could we afford the food? You know, it's this whole food price thing. So absolutely, you know, if this can't feed the world, then what are we doing here? Because of moving, mobbing, mowing, and intensive grazing management, we are 5 times as productive as the county average, and that's without planting a seed or using a bag of chemical fertilizer in 60 years. So imagine if the neighbor would do that, and then the other neighbor would do that, and the other neighbor would do that. You know, then the fact is there's so much abundance that we can't even imagine how many people we could feed this way. If we actually focus on soil fertility, on symbiotic multispeciation, stacking, and complex relationships in our production models, we actually produce way more per square foot than the average monoculture farm. Look, when the industry points their camera at the Tyson chicken house and says, look at what we're producing in this tiny footprint, they're not showing the footprint of all the grain going into that house and the footprint of all of the land or lagoons, especially in the case of pig production. So they don't show all these, you know, ancillary, these other things. And so a pastured system, while on the face you might say, well, it takes more acreage, it actually puts the animals where the feed is being produced. So the actual production per acre is actually higher here overall than it is in the industry. The US right now has 35 million acres of lawn and 36 million acres feeding and housing recreational horses. That's 71 million acres. That's actually enough to feed the whole country without a single farm. So it's not like we're short of land. We have enough portable shelters to raise a lot of chickens, but they're all individual little mobile units, modular units. It's not one big stationary thing, it's modular units. So you can take exactly the same production that's being done in pig houses and chicken houses and beef feedlots and whatever, and you decentralize that across the landscape. Now you actually integrate the animal with its environment. Now you don't have a waste problem, you have a waste asset, and you have, instead of a segregated situation, you have a highly integrated situation. So every morning Every morning we move these shelters. This gives them, so they get fresh air, sunshine, lots of exercise, brand new grass, and they don't come back. These birds don't come back to this spot for a whole year, so it has a whole year of rest before it comes back. And we had a University of North Carolina UNC vet student come up a couple years ago to do a study. She wanted to see how much salmonella we had in the soil, because it stays in the soil. And so, I mean, we've been running this for 50 years, chickens out here on the field. So she wanted to measure ours compared to a farm that hadn't had a chicken on it for 50 years. And what was amazing was the salmonella levels were identical. There was no difference between ours and theirs, which is indicative of the fact that the rest period is long enough and there's enough biological activity here, because we graze these with cows, we run turkeys across them, and so the field gets multiple uses, through the season. The whole thing here is offering a credible alternative to the entire factory farming system. We actually believe that the factory farming system is completely unnecessary. It's obsolete. There's no manure to spread, there's no flies, no smells. You can come out and eat lunch on one of these things. It just takes more farmers. And we recognize that, but we don't apologize for it, because we recognize that we have made a very strategic decision to substitute people for pharmaceutical intensity, energy intensity, infrastructure intensity, so it becomes a people-centric farm as opposed to a physical structure, pharmaceutical, chemical-centric farm. The land issue, the production issue, is actually helped a lot by a decentralized, democratized, integrated approach. It just means that it's spread out the land, spread across the landscape, instead of being concentrated in little segregated spots. Well, our little one sentence, one phrase moniker here is healing the land one bite at a time. Is it healing? Is the chicken healthy? Is the person who eats it healthy? Is what this does, is it Coca-Cola does not make anybody healthy. Velveeta cheese does not make anybody healthy. And it doesn't make anybody healthy on down the line. The process isn't healthy. The environment is not healthified, if you will, as a result of this product. And so is the chain that leads to it, and is the nourishment that it creates, is the whole chain authentically healing, start to finish. So we have our protocols, we have our principles, and so we are trying to handle faithfully the land that we've been entrusted with, and fill that land up with what we're doing. And people need to realize that what they choose to eat, how they choose to ingest and handle their bodies, actually speaks to that health.